In the 1940s, a very strange coincidence occurred in a psychiatric hospital in Maryland. At the same time, two women were admitted to the hospital. Both suffered from hallucinations, and the strange thing was that their hallucinations were exactly the same. Both believed that they were the Virgin Mary. One day, these two women came face to face in a common area. After exchanging a few meaningless words, one of the women introduced herself. "Hello, I am Mary, the mother of Jesus." The other woman looked at her and said, "That's impossible. I am the mother of Jesus." The first woman replied, "You're crazy. I am Mary." Hospital staff who overheard this interesting conversation began to listen. After a while, both women fell silent. The slightly older one suddenly had a moment of insight and said, "Wait a second. If you are Mary, then I must be your mother." And just like that, the problem was solved. The two women hugged each other and celebrated this realization. In the following weeks, doctors noticed something strange. The older woman, the one who gave up being Mary, also gave up her hallucinations in a sense. She responded to treatment much more quickly and soon improved enough to be discharged. We learn about this clinical case from a 1955 issue of Harper's Magazine. The person who introduced it into the literature was the famous social psychologist Dr. Milton Rokeach, who read the story in the magazine. Milton wondered, could this be used as a treatment method? In other words, what would happen if patients with similar problems, similar hallucinations, even exactly the same hallucinations, were brought together? Could this create a crack in minds sealed by hallucinations and allow the light of reason to enter? An interesting question, isn't it? Milton didn't just ask it. He immediately set out to test it. First, he secured funding for the experiment, then traveled to psychiatric hospitals searching for patients with similar hallucinations. Before long, he found three very suitable candidates. All three believed they were Jesus Christ. Without wasting any time, he admitted them to Ypsilanti State Hospital in Michigan and began his experiment in 1959. The patients were placed in Ward D-23. Shortly afterward, they were brought together in an empty waiting room with very little furniture and no distractions. Dr. Milton entered with his three assistants, introduced himself, and explained that they would be spending a lot of time together over the next few months. Then, he asked the three patients, one elderly, one middle-aged, and one quite young, to introduce themselves. The first patient said, "My name is Joseph Cassell." Joseph was 58 years old and had been in psychiatric hospitals for over 20 years. Despite this, he was the calmest and most cooperative of the three. The doctor asked if he wanted to add anything else. Joseph replied, "Yes, I am God." Let's note here that in Christianity, Jesus is also referred to as God, related to the belief in the Holy Trinity, one God existing as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Back to our story. The next patient was Clyde Benson, in his 70s. "My name is Clyde Benson," he said. When the doctor asked if he had another name, Benson replied, "Yes, my fifth name is God, and my sixth name is Jesus." The final patient was Leon, 38 years old. "According to my birth records, my name is Dr. Domino Dominorum et Rex Rexarum, Simplis Christianus Pueris Mentalis Doctor," he said. Translated from Latin, this means Lord of Lords, King of Kings, simple Christian, child psychiatrist. Leon went on to say that his birth records also stated that he was the reincarnation of Jesus of Nazareth. Joseph was the first to object. He couldn't understand Leon's claim of reincarnation and said, "I know who I am. I am God. I am Jesus. I am the Holy Spirit. If I weren't, why would I say I am Jesus?" After Joseph continued for a while, Leon interrupted and said, "Mr. Cassell, I do not accept you judging everyone here as insane. There are sane people here too. Every person is a house. Don't forget that." The doctor allowed these arguments to continue for a while, then asked Clyde for his opinion. Clyde muttered that he represented the resurrection and that he and Jesus were the same resurrection. This first meeting was valuable for understanding the group's dynamics. What followed were months of observations, controlled discussions, and spontaneous conversations. The key question was, who would give up their hallucinations and move toward recovery? In the case of the two Marys, this had happened easily. Would the same thing happen here? To understand what happened next and how the experiment's methodology began to break down, we need to look at the control group. Dr. Milton also selected a control group with the same hallucinations, but without any interaction or intervention. Meanwhile, with the three Jesuses, he increased control and manipulation. Through his assistants, he began provoking them against one another, constantly lying to each patient about the others and fueling tension. Eventually, this tension escalated into physical violence. One day, the oldest patient struck young Leon with a stick. Their beds, chairs, and dining tables were also deliberately arranged side by side. During one routine meeting, the doctor asked why he had brought the three of them together. Clyde made no comment. Joseph said he believed he had been included to prove that the others were mentally ill. Leon, however, grasped the essence of the situation and said, "You are provoking us against each other." He even speculated that they were being brainwashed with electronic voodoo magic. The real problem was that despite months passing, none of them gave up their claim of being Jesus. There were no signs of improvement. If anything, their hallucinations seemed to intensify. The experiment was not going well. At this point, the doctor began making decisions that completely undermined the experiment's reliability. He sent Leon letters from an imaginary wife and sent gifts and letters to the older patient from a trusted friend trying to manipulate them. All of this backfired and worsened their symptoms. Eventually, he also ended the control group. In a sense, he became obsessed with the three Jesuses. In his own words, he tried everything to create cracks in chained minds. He even hired a young and attractive female assistant to tempt Leon. Technically, the experiment was long over, but the unfortunate reality was that it was conducted in the late 1950s, a time with little knowledge about mental disorders and no ethical regulations. From the beginning, the patients suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. Treatment options at the time were extremely limited, and the disorder's spectrum would only be defined more precisely later. Years afterward, the doctor questioned aspects of the experiment and admitted his mistakes. In a preface written in 1984, he acknowledged that manipulating patients and ethical violations were wrong and expressed regret. Nevertheless, he published a book about the experiment in 1964, approaching the subject with self-criticism. He also described his own experiences with hallucinations after taking certain medications, stating that, although he knew they were hallucinations, he truly experienced and believed them. He concluded that what seems like a hallucination to outsiders can feel like concrete reality to the person experiencing it. In a way, he had his own awakening. He famously said, "I may not have cured the three Jesuses, but perhaps they cured me." He also admitted that he had developed a kind of God complex. In summary, the Three Christs experiment became a landmark study in psychiatry. Its goal was to understand how hallucinatory beliefs and identities form, and whether they can be changed. Instead, it demonstrated how resilient such beliefs can be. All three patients continued to identify as Jesus and held firmly to that belief. For this reason, the experiment is significant, not only scientifically, but also ethically. It contributed to discussions about informed consent, patient rights, and ethical standards in psychology and psychiatry. About 10 years later, in 1974, the U.S. National Research Act was passed, enforcing ethical standards in human research, and many experiments like the Milgram experiment were discontinued. What the Three Christs taught us is how mysterious the human brain is, and how understanding its problems is sometimes the key to decoding it. Psychology, psychiatry, and all fields studying the human mind hold the potential to answer many questions we still cannot. Finally, there is also a very enjoyable 2020 film about this story, starring actors such as Peter Dinklage and Richard Gere. Those curious about the story can watch the movie. Some of the footage in this video was taken from that film.